I would like to bring into the conversation Siddharth Chatterjee, UN Resident Coordinator in Kenya. And I understand you've been quite vocal in your calls for more business presence at the UN. Could you also tell us what you've been doing with IOE and business during these challenging times?
Well, thank you very much for having me on this particularly important centenary of the IOE, and big congratulations to IOE. Perhaps it's important to start with an anecdote, since I see my sister Sanda Ojiambo there, and it's important to put this context of what actually led to the UN in Kenya partnering up with 6 companies: GlaxoSmithKline, Safaricom, Huawei, Kenya Healthcare Federation, Philips, and Merck. We joined up as the UN family with these 6 companies to deal with the burden of maternal mortality in 6 of the highest burden counties. I mean, these 6 counties contributed to 50% of the maternal deaths. This was a first. It was a first for companies to actually come together with the UN system, but to go to areas which are traditionally highly marginalized, very unstable. They used to see the scourge, or well, they still do, the scourge of cross-border terror attacks from Somalia. In a matter of 2.5 years, we were able to also unlock about $15 million of funding from a trust fund. We were able to reduce the maternal mortality ratios by 1/3. Now, let me put this into context. In my own country, India, that would have taken somewhere close to 10 years to do that. Because what we did was we impacted the national maternal mortality ratio average, which was 488 deaths per 100,000 live births, and brought it down to 360. So we realized early on, as way back as 2014, 2015, the strength in a partnership between the UN system and the private sector, and which got me invited to the World Economic Forum in 2017, along with the county health executives and the governors of these particular counties. And then that led to the establishment of a public-private partnership platform at the UN General Assembly by then Kenya's Foreign Minister, Amina Mohammed. And this has now become one of the most vibrant platforms, which has brought together close to 400 companies. And what we are trying to do, and the role of the UN here, is essentially as a convener, as a connector, and as a catalyzer. We de-risk by moral authority, not with the cash resources we bring to the table. And this is where the Secretary General's reforms are so critical, because he has empowered me as his resident coordinator to undertake this discussion across the UN system, we are 25 UN funds, agencies, funds, and programs. And what we can do is actually galvanize and use the resource base of the private sector. And what does the private sector really bring? Big data, technology, and innovation. How do we harness that together with our moral presence, work with the governments, and make sure that we don't do it as a projectized approach, but impact the lives of millions? And this is what our program is currently doing. So essentially, our relationship with IOE and business is intrinsic. It has grown and evolved organically. But over time, this relationship has now been, by the Dag Hammarskjöld Foundation in Sweden, has been declared a best practice. What we need to be doing is the renaissance of multilateralism, exactly the thing that has been discussed earlier by the Secretary General. And the new form of multilateralism will be where the public-private sector come together and the UN becomes that enabling body of leaving no one behind. Over to you.
Siddharth, thank you very much for that concrete example and indeed the success of that maternal mortality reduction campaign. Part of this SDG partnership platform, do you see this as a role model that could be scaled up and replicated across other parts of the UN? Would you like to see other UN resident coordinators following the Kenyan example?
Thank you for that question. You know, you've heard the UN Deputy Secretary General too making a clarion call to every resident coordinator in the world. She has said, flip the orthodoxy, which means we have to be unconventional. This is 10 years away from the accomplishment of the SDGs. It's the decade of action. We just have to do things differently. And doing things differently means resident coordinators, we as resident coordinators have to be far more agile and ambidextrous. We need to be able to inform the government with the finest intellectual capital in terms of public policy and how to implement it. And yet with the UN country team, reach the furthest behind. And Sanda will tell you that, we've gone into places where there was an absence of government. We've gone into places where it was considered highly risky. But because of that dexterity that we've been able to bring in, we've been able to reach other milestones. So absolutely, yes, that chapter of, today the COVID-19 rivals the Great Depression that we saw earlier. No government, the wealthiest government will not be able to put resources in terms of the development programming, which we've seen traditionally happen in low-income countries. That chapter is over. The new model of partnerships is going to be public-private partnerships. And I'll just tell you for one simple reason. The median age of Africa is 18. The population of Africa at this moment is 1.2 billion. By 2050, this will be 2.3 billion, of which 850 million will be young people. It is here that we will reap the demographic dividend. So we need a Marshall Plan of the same ambition that we saw post-Second World War happen in Africa. It'll only happen with the private sector. So this is actually the real time for enabling those relations to take place. So as an RC, I would encourage all the other 128 resident coordinators, this is the way to go. Over to you.
Siddharth, thank you very much. I think that message is received loud and clear. And indeed, let me bring Sanda Ojiambo, Executive Director of the UN Global Compact, into the conversation. We've heard the UN Secretary General praise your efforts engaging so many companies as members. We've heard Siddharth mention you too. Now, I understand that you're a relative newcomer, so I was just wondering what for you has been striking about the efforts to bring the UN closer to business over the past 6 months, and how do you see the cooperation evolving over time?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me first start by congratulating IOE on this very important milestone of its centenary. And, sincere greetings to my good friend Sid, who, although we're actually in the same city right now, haven't seen each other for a while due to COVID, and to all the other esteemed panelists. As you said, I'm new to role. I'm about 2 months in, but I'm not new to the Global Compact. I've watched and interacted with the Global Compact for close to 10 years. And it's really struck me the importance of the role that continuing to bring business closer to the business of the UN and certainly closer to the business of the Sustainable Development Goals has what it's done in terms of reaping success, as well as also opening a clear pathway for business and truly a pathway to prosperity. I think purpose-led business that is guided by the SDGs is truly the type of business that makes a change, not just for business benefit, but also for societal transformation. And I think really that's what the UN Global Compact aims to do. Partnerships such as that with the IOE also help us really further our focus on a couple of key principles. But over the last 6 months, I think the world literally has been turned upside down. No country has been left untouched and unimpacted by COVID. I think for most businesses, what has been really core is health and safety of employees, business continuity, actually even business survival in some cases. Around the world, millions have lost jobs, millions of SMEs have shut down. And I think the informal sector that the Secretary General spoke so passionately about earlier literally is in need of a massive rebuild, because for many economies, it is the informal sector that drives forward. So, what have we seen businesses do, I think, in the Global Compact? We've seen businesses really reflect back on what we call the 10 principles. You have to do business, even under the pressures of COVID, that respects human rights, that respect labor, that respect, environmental stewardship, and certainly that, condone corruption. Because that principle-led business is what allows a business to then really engage in the rebuild and the recovery that we need post-COVID. At the Global Compact, we issued a special appeal to business, really talking about the need to focus business on the 10 principles. We also took advantage of the whole virtual and digital shift to do a couple of online sessions with with companies and business leaders, really talking honestly about the impact that COVID had on their business, as well as sharing openly strategies for rebuild and recovery. With over 20,000 plus viewers, we think that this really helped impact, from a thought leadership perspective, what the role of business would do. But let me reflect on a very important partnership that Sid has highlighted, which is truly our partnership with the UN country teams, because we really need to work a lot closer with country teams to drive that holistic response to COVID, to other sustainable development issues, and really help drive forward countries' development. So that's been a snapshot of my 6 months. I truly am excited about the opportunity to continue to work stronger and better with UN country teams. Truly also excited about the continued partnership with IOE.
Thank you very, very much. And I'm just going to ask you, Sander, and each of the contributors for literally 30 seconds. We're hearing the whole time about building back better. Sander, in a few words, what does building back better mean for you?
First, I would push the definition a little bit further, building forward better. I think we want to challenge what back was. I think we're looking for a new frontier where we're very focused on a green economy growth. We're focused on inclusive business models. We're focused on rebuilding the SME sector, including the informal sector. We're very focused on these fundamental inequalities that I think are really tearing apart our social safety nets. We're focused on rebuilding a strong safety net too.
Siddharth, so perhaps it's not build back better, but build forward better. A few words on what that means for you.
Well, in this case, it means it is a renaissance. I would compare it to the same inflection point that Catholicism saw through the period of the Renaissance, and which led to a transformation of Catholicism. It has to be seen with that sense of urgency and vibrancy and dynamism. I think building back better is when we put the lens, particularly in Africa, on young people and particularly women and girls, because sub-Saharan Africa loses $95 billion year on year because of inequality, because of lack of opportunities for women. And there will be no reaping of a demographic dividend in Africa unless men and women share an equality of rights, have the same opportunities that advances GDPs and advances nation states.